Thanks, Walt. Good afternoon, East Coasters, and good morning to the West Coasters. But I just wanted to talk about the a DAX function that I tried to touch on last year when I went over the Excel ecosystem, and I didn't quite get to finish it. So just a recap of what I've covered already, I just kind of talk about Excel because Excel is great. It does a tremendous amount of things. They keep developing it very well, and it's really providing some good tools for professional analytics personnel. And so, probably back in June, I talked about the data ecosystem. I talked about a little bit about, this ecosystem, how Microsoft envisions it with Azure, big data, cloud computing, so on and so forth. Then we talked about how to connect to certain databases. There's two different ways that I personally connect to databases in the cloud and in order to data wrangle some really large data sources. We talked about some low data fundamentals, talked about creating relationships in Power Pivot, and the same applies for Power BI, which we'll touch on just briefly today. We also talked about the calculate function. So the calculate function in DAX is huge, and if you've never used it, shame on you, shame on you. It's a really powerful function. It makes our job a lot easier. So I think as professional analytics personnel and a company, we should probably get comfortable with the calculate function if you're involved with Power BI and DAX type projects. Example 4, we talked about transforming data in Power Query. And then we talked briefly on some functions. One really cool function is SumX. And the reason why this is a powerful function is that because it iterates over every row in your table that you provided. And sometimes when your denominator changes based on filters, you may get the wrong, like for instance, a percentage. I deal with readiness, so I could get the wrong readiness rating if my denominator number is changing. Well, sometimes you want to force it to always be counted. And so the SumX is a good function to do that. We briefly talked about that. There's a bunch of other X families that do the same for counting, for averaging, for ranking. And then we got to where we're going to talk about today, the nested ifs using the switch function. And so the switch function is great because if you've ever seen a nested if statement in code in Excel, typically you don't want to go more than 2 layers deep, but I've seen some like 5-6 layer nested ifs that work great until it doesn't work, and then you're trying to figure out why, and it's very difficult to troubleshoot. Can everyone hear me okay?
Sure can.
Okay, thanks. Thanks. All right. So nested ifs, if they get too large, they're just really hard to kind of deal with. And so DAX has a switch statement, which makes what you see on the right here a lot easier to deal with. And there's an example that Microsoft supplies on their website with months in the calendar, and that's what you're going to see right here. And so let's say you had a data source and you were given integer numbers for months, and you wanted to put it in name convention. You could use this statement. It's very concise. It's very easy to follow. Even if you don't know how to code anything, it's pretty easy to follow along. But if you see this, the month would be like the integer that you're provided. And if you see a 1, well, guess what? I want it to say January. If you see a 2, guess what? I want it to say February, so on and so forth. So it's basically a big if else. And finally, if you don't find any of these numbers, I want you to paste unknown month number to show up. So it's very, very easy to deal with. It's very, I think, a quick way to deal with nested ifs if you have that in your coding. And I just like the syntax. It's easy. It's, again, I keep saying easy. Yeah, because it is easy to follow once you get used to it. But another good another good function use of the function switch is in dealing with the template of a Power BI thing, and that's something I just realized recently, maybe the last couple months. And it's from this hack. So I wish I could say it's all me, but it's not. It's this hack here. It's a pretty easy to follow YouTube video, and they demonstrate exactly how to create like a custom template as well as custom subtotals, which is a challenge sometimes. And I'm just going to show a quick example of that, of what I mean. So I'm going to get out of here, and then I'm just going to go to Power BI. I'm going to pull it up, and hopefully you could see it. It's not too small. Okay. So you may have a Power BI model, and it may look something like this. This is something very simple. Here I have a model table. And you could kind of look at the model table. Over here. You can look at the model table. It's just model A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And that could be anything. It'd be like cars. If you had cars, it could be like the BMW, which I wish I had. I don't. Mercedes, so on and so forth. And so you have model. You have another table that's a region. So north, south, east, west. And then you have a table with the data in it that kind of like combines the two. So you'll have like your sales. So you have like model A, region north, and the total sales. So it looks kind of like this when you set it up in Power BI through relationships. And if you notice, there's this like standalone table here. It's a template, and it's not connected to anything. There's no association to it. But that's kind of how you go. You get to customize your Power BI view. If you don't like exactly how Microsoft kind of seems to categorize things and put things in its internal hierarchy. And so what does that look like? Well, in this case, I wanted to create like my own custom template, and I wanted to look a certain way. And so that one is it's nothing more than this. That's not it. Here it goes. You have a column for row index, and that's important because when you put it in Power BI, you want it to sort by that order, so it shows up on this view in this order. Then I wanted to say northeast. I wanted to say northeast subtotal with some spacing in it. I wanted to say south and west, and then some spacing, and then so on and so forth for the other categories. I just want to add some spacing so it's not all like left aligned or middle or right aligned. I want to just customize it the way I want it. I want it to appear. And so let me go back to Power BI. And so I'm at 7 minutes now. Try to give some more time to Connor. But if you just look at a normal table and normal Excel and how it links things together, you might create something like this where you have your model on the left side and then you've got the sales. You might create like a slicer where you kind of slice through. You just look at south. If I wanted to look at south, if I wanted to look at west. If I wanted to look at south and west together, you just hold control and you kind of click on it. But what if I wanted it differently? What if I wanted southwest with model B only or model A? I guess you could add more slicers to it. You could do that. I guess you could add more columns to your data. You could certainly do that. What if I want south to be different? I guess you could go to the data source and change it, but it just gets very lengthy on all of the upkeep. And so one way, by using the switch function, which we're going to show in a second, you can create a custom template. So this is what I did minutes ago. So here, this is like the normal view. If you don't like it, you could you don't like the subtotals, you want it itemized. Maybe I want A and B together for just south or just east. But using the custom template and the switch function, you could create something like this where you have it appear exactly how you want it with the spacing. One thing that I'm hiding here, it's the row index. So if you see it, I just kind of peeled the curtain back a little bit. But that's what's kind of putting it in a certain order. But maybe like the decision maker doesn't want to click, doesn't want to see filtering. Maybe the decision maker just wants to see the values that they're really interested in only, without having to, do a bunch of slicers and so on and so forth. Well, this is a quick way to do it. And so you could see the spacing aligns the way I wanted it to. You can see the totals aligned with the way I wanted it to. And what makes this work is this switch function, and I'm going to show it. And I call it my custom sales list. So I'm going to look at some code here. And this is the only code that I'll be looking at again. But this function is what does it. So it's very similar to an if else, but it uses this variable here called current item. And all it's saying is, hey, if if my current item is north based on my template, I want you to do something. And here it's called north sales. And what that is, it's a measure that only looks at the sales from the north and sums it up. And how do I do that? I do that through the calculate function. And I'm going to show you how that looks. This is how it looks. It's saying north sales. I want you to equal calculate. I want you to sum my sales, which is nothing more than the sales column. But I only want you to do it when the region is equal to north. Powerful. This is an SQL statement. So this is like saying select star all records from my table sales where my region is equal to north. But it's much more concise, but that's exactly what it's doing. And so going back to the template, that's what you can do. And you can do that for sky's the limit on whatever category you're looking for. So that way it's not up to the user to say, hey, I'm looking at these numbers and they're not adding up right. And then, one of the first questions I would ask is, well, what are your filters set at? Because that's usually an issue. Like maybe they click too many filters and they're just not understanding exactly what they think they should be seeing. Well, this is a way to kind of force you to see what you need to see based on what you want to see. And that's what the switch function allows. And that is all I wanted to show.